This year marks an anniversary, 1980, because it's 25 years ago this year, July actually, that KOTA television come on the air. And it's been a great 25 years, and the lady that made it all possible is my boss, Mrs. Duhamel, Helen Duhamel. Helen, president, general manager of KOTA radio first, and then television. Helen, we don't get on TV very often together.
Not anymore. We used to come up once a year.
I know what you'd come on. And
I'd come from a trip, and I'd come in and tell about it.
You haven't done that for a long? Haven't you taken any trips?
Not for several years, but I've taken a lot of trips that I haven't been on TV, that I haven't told about.
Helen, when most people are thinking about retiring, you started thinking about going into another business. You owned Duhamel, the Duhamel store here in Rapid City. In 1954, you bought radio, KOTA radio. The next year, you had television. Did you ever think about retiring at that time, or did you just want to keep going?
Well, I think when you enjoy it, why quit? And really, I am semi-retired now, and it's hard on a person because my whole life was my work. Surely you have some social ties, but it's mostly business. I had the family, I had 4 children, and worked, and that's just about it. Well, all of a sudden, to have your work taken away from you, and being forced to retire because that's the way things are.
It's kind of hard to do that, and I don't think I'd ever want to just retire that fast. Maybe you made the right decision, but weren't you, if not the first, one of the first women to own a radio and television station?
Yes, and certainly one of the very first to be active in the management.
Mm-hmm.
And after a year or so, I found out that I wasn't the type to hire an outside manager. So I became active in 56. I became not only the president, but also the general manager, and I was that for 20 years.
Helen, you were a stockholder of KOTA radio before you bought the station.
Oh, yes.
Then you bought out the other stockholders.
Yes.
In 1954.
Mm-hmm.
I had worked here 4 years at that time. In fact, we got to know each other even before you owned the station. I used to do a little advertising for you.
Yes, you did a night program for me.
Remember that, 1950?
Oh, I remember it well.
And then you bought out in 1954. But you must have started thinking about television right after you got the radio, didn't you?
Well, I thought about television 2 years before. It was in 1952. There was Bob Dean as the manager of KOTA. He was supposed to put up 1/4 the money, and the Elks Theater, the men who owned the Elks theaters, they were supposed to put up 25%. The Rapid City Daily Journal at that time was supposed to put up 25%, and Helen Duhamel 25%. Then I found out that these businesses all felt that they didn't want television in here, and it was just a ploy with no intention of having television. So that really made me very disgusted and angry, and I believe that's one of the reasons why I bought out the radio station, and so 2 years later, then I did file for television.
December 1954?
Yes, we received our permit on December 8th, 1954, and that summer we had made our application. And when I found out the chief engineer had put such a small amperage and the power so low, so I saw RCA, and we got fixed around.
Got the proper power.
Yes. We got the permit for the maximum power, but we only put on about 2/3, excuse me, about 65% of the power.
You did the first program, a live program on television. I remember we were out at the studio on West St. John Street, And it was early evening. We did the first live broadcast. You introduced all of us on the,
That's right.
staff. Remember that?
I remember that well.
And then we all went out in the street and thought we'd be famous on television. Everybody should know us.
I don't know how many people watched this.
That was a long time ago.
It surely was.
We had kind of shortened broadcasting at that time. Didn't we come on at 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon?
No, we started out at 6 at night,
Was it?
and we stayed on until 10. Then our Captain Glenn, he had arranged it so that he could come on at 5, and he and Al, and with Fun Wagon, and he and Al Mack. So then we went on from 5 until 11, and of course we were not interconnected. And then we eventually went on, I believe it was about midnight, but at least we were on prime time.
We had some good programs like Captain Glenn, the Fun Wagon. The kids used to come up here in the studio, and then we had the Hoedown Jamboree, you remember, with all
Yes.
Buddy Meredith and all the country artists. We had a lot of good programming in those years, and still do.
Yes.
Not as much live, but...
No, but everything else came on Kinescope, and we had live programming, and we didn't interfere too much with our radio, because our radio, you know, went on at 5 o'clock in the morning, that time, I recall, and went off at midnight. And so we had television in prime time only.
Helen, you really branched out, though. We started with one station. You went to KDUH second, then KHSD, and now over in Sheridan.
Yes. Well, down in Nebraska, a group or a committee came up to see me. They said they would raise money, but they wanted some affiliation, and they had gone to Grove, they told me, in Cheyenne, and he wasn't interested in putting up a station.
For Nebraska.
For Nebraska, in that part. And then I went down, possibly to 6 or 8 towns. I went to Alliance meetings in Hay Springs and in Chadron and all, and they were talked into it, and they invested their money in debentures. And the debentures, I can't recall, I've got lots of them never used in my office, but they bought them in Merriman, Nebraska. They bought some of the largest ones, and some of my old friends down there became my lifelong friends after that. They sold this, and well, my feeling, I could have raised the money and put up the station. I felt that if they had a $100 share in it,
Take more interest.
they would take more interest, and they'd watch that station. And that's the way it worked out. But we had some that bought $1,000 shares, and a few that bought $2,000 shares.
You weren't there, I think it was 57, wasn't it? 56 or 7?
It was 56 that we got our permit to build down there, and we raised the money in 56. And we went on the air in the spring, it was in March
57.
of 57.
And when did you go up on the hill at Deadwood and Lead, Helen? Must have been...
It was a few years later.
maybe around 1960.
I think so, yeah.
And then about 2 or 3 years ago, we branched out over in Wyoming, so you have coverage, and you're able to offer people top programming on our network in about a 5-state area.
Oh yes, parts of 5 states.
Did you ever think it would branch out into that when we started?
No, but you see, I was a rancher's daughter. I remember when I went into Washington, and Charlie Whalen, who was my attorney in Washington, said, "Helen, you're not going to put television in. Let's find you a place where there are people." And I said, well, having lived on the ranch, I said, that's the people that really need television.
Serve everybody.
And the olden days, when I was a little girl, we had neither radio or television. We just played, the whole family played cards in the evening for amusement. And I suppose on the party line, they got news. I recall that there was 8 rings, and everybody took down their receiver. So that's the way they had the news. But I just felt that the ranchers needed TV. So I wasn't interested in going into a city where, of course, we could have made more money, but it was real.
Service.
It was service.
Service is the word.
Yeah.
Helen, do you ever find in going to New York or Chicago or Los Angeles and dealing in television and radio, it's a little tough for a woman in a man's world?
No, that's not right, because for several years, at least 3, when I went into the network meetings or the National Association of Broadcaster meetings, I was the only woman broadcaster there. And men would come over and say, well, hello, and quickly look at my name card. They couldn't remember my name, but they remembered me. But I had men that had been in business for many years give me their home telephone numbers,
That's
their
why
office.
you went to all those meetings.
No.
With all those men, you were the only lady.
But I never, well, I went there to learn what I could learn about it. And any question you had at the luncheon table, we discussed things. I learned more from these gentlemen that I just knew casually, because I wasn't in competition to them. They would help me any way they could. And they were very nice. I never called one of them, but they gave me their numbers to call them if I had any trouble or any question. They certainly were willing to help.
Do you think it's more competitive today in television and radio than it was 20 years ago or 25?
Well, there's more people getting into the business and trying to get into the business. And of course, KOTA-TV is a big deal. And there's more uncertainty today. Where we were grandfathered in, now they're looking at it to take it away or force you to sell part of your holdings.
If you own diverse interests.
Well, yes, like cable.
Or a newspaper or radio or something.
Yes. Well, of course, some of them have had to get out of the newspaper business or else get out of sell the television. And now, we have owned this for 26 years, the radio station, and 25 years, a little more than 25 years, the television, the radio, 26 years. And that would have been called grandfathered in. But now I've read the paper and heard various rumblings the next year and a half. The have-nots are going to try and take it away from the haves.
After you put the service there a quarter of a century ago.
Yes, making very little money, but keep investing. We don't pay dividends. We keep putting the money back in because there's always new equipment to buy. Nothing's permanent in television. Something else comes along and you buy. And then, of course, you have a little breakage.
Helen, you watch a lot of TV, I know, when I come in your office.
Yes,
You've always got the television on. Do you find the quality today is high or as good as it was 25 years ago?
Much better.
Much better?
Much better. The human element, they still make mistakes. But, of course, we employ twice as many people to do the same amount of work. So they should be better.
You signed a lot of paychecks in your time.
Yes.
You signed mine for how many years now? 26, isn't it?
Yes.
You think you'd get rid of me after a while.
That we don't want to do. You're one of my best assets.
But there's a lot of people going through the doors, in and out.
Yes.
You've met a lot of fine people who worked for you over the years. They've gone on to other jobs.
Yep. Well, when I first bought out, the wages were very low because Dean and George and that group, they said, well, it's a training field for bigger towns. See? and it was an excuse. I think that the average good salary at that time was about $60 a week. Can you remember that?
I remember what I got when I first came here, and I won't tell you, though. It wasn't quite that high.
No, but that's the ones that had worked up to it. And I immediately, of course, when I bought out, we raised the salaries, and we raised them again. But it was just considered, that was their excuse at least, that after they got, then they would get a job in Denver or Minneapolis or someplace.
And a few of them stayed here.
Yes, but they weren't, they were just still training you ones that stayed here, I guess.
Helen, let me ask you one final question. You've seen a lot of programs come and go. I think one of our top programs back in 1955 was Industry on Parade. Remember that thing?
Yeah.
When we had a fill program, we'd have these programs we'd put on.
Yes, they were for free.
I know.
Yeah, public service.
When we didn't have network at that time. We had to. That's a lot of time to fill. Now we have network shows.
Well, we had network shows. They were kinescopes that were sent out, and I had to go in to sell ourselves. It took me sometimes a year to get some program. They wouldn't even put out, and we were in the lowest group as far as price was concerned. But one thing, everyone was very faithful. As soon as television went on, their sets went on because it was new. And I know that I had people calling me up and ask, for programming because maybe they had 3 or 4 children and they couldn't afford to send shows. They didn't take the paper because they couldn't afford to, and they could get television free, but they just would like to have the programming so that the children would know what's going to be on.
And I think our sponsors, our local business places here in the hills and the Western area, have been faithful in sponsoring us, keeping us on the air those years. But the one question I want to ask you, Helen, in closing, would you do it all over again if you were the same age, same time? Would you go back and do it then?
Oh yes, I have no regrets at all.
No regrets at all?
No. I might regret that I had let some things happen to me that I didn't realize were happening, that you trusted people.
Live and learn, I think they say.
Yeah, but no, I'd do it all over again.
Helen, you've been a good boss over these years, and we've always enjoyed having you with an open door policy. If we had problems, we came to see you. We all have problems in radio and television.
There's always personal problems as well as business problems.
But you've always been here to be a helping hand, and I hope in 25 years we can do this again. That would make it about 2000, whatever.
Well, you can, do you think that you'll be around?
I don't know.
You'll be living. I don't expect to be here. I expect to be up with the Angels at 25 years.
Well, we never know at that time, but if we're here, we'll make it another date on Party Line. Helen, thank you a lot for being with us today. You've been good to work for, and congratulations on 25 great years in television and 26 on radio.
Thank you, Verne. We've learned a lot in the 25 years, haven't we?
My guest on TV Party Line today, General Manager and President, Helen Duhamel.